This video is for pages 33 through 49. We start with scene 3, a room in Capulet's house. It's between basically Lady Capulet, Juliet, and the nurse. And you can read this on your own. You don't need me to dissect this one, primarily because there's not a whole lot to dissect. Basically, what you need to know is right here. There is, in this scene, you learn about the nurse. The nurse is a major character of the book. She's there for 4 big reasons. Number 1, she's there for comic relief. She's very funny. She doesn't speak in poetry, and a lot of her jokes are of physical, sexual nature, not that different than the kind of jokes that we saw in Act 1, Scene 1 with the men. And if you read it, you'll see it. Second thing is that she's some kind of hybrid between a nanny and a nurse. Like she's kind of like a babysitter, but she also really was the nurse for Juliet when she was just born. And if you read carefully, she chronically mentions the importance of how she was the woman who breastfed Juliet, not the mother. It was, in fact, the nurse that did that. And that was actually relatively common for the time. The third thing is that the nurse is basically Juliet's second mother. She it takes care of her still to this day, even though she's 13 years old. And the fourth thing is that Juliet probably trusts the nurse more than the mother, and she eventually will become a confidant as the story moves on. One thing to note, however, are in these lines where Lady Capulet does actually bring up the possibility of marriage to her daughter Juliet, and Juliet says flat out, not thinking about marriage. She's only 13 years old. And the nurse piles in with thinking that marriage sounds like a great idea, and eventually, the nurse actually goes so far as to call Paris a man of wax, which means he's perfect. You could sculpt him into a piece of art that would be carved in wax. But Juliet's not interested. Okay, that's it for this scene. Go ahead and turn to page 41, Act 1, Scene 4. Enter Romeo, Mercutio, and Benvolio and maskers. So they bring some buddies. They all have masks. They maybe not have put them on yet, but some might be wearing them. And they are on their way to the Capulet's house to sneak into the party, which they should have no problem doing because it's a mask party. They should be able to get in no problem. And this scene is dedicated to Romeo, Mercutio, and Benvolio participating in very playful, very creative banter. They are certainly giving Romeo a hard time about this. They are tired of hearing about how in love he is and how he can't handle it. This is meant to be fun and funny, but there are a few other things that go along. So I'm not going to read every line here, but you get the idea. There's a lot that happens that we can comment on in this. There's a good amount of antithesis. Give me a torch. I am not for this ambling. Being but heavy, I will bear the light. Then again, Romeo says, no, not I. Believe me, you have dancing shoes with nimble soles. I have a soul of lead. So soul, play on words, is a pun. And then lead comes here. So stakes me to the ground I cannot move. And Mercutio responds, you are a lover. Borrow Cupid's wings. So lead, wings, antithesis. And then Romeo says, I am too sore and pierced with his shaft to soar with his light feathers. And so bound I cannot bound a pitch above dull woe. Under love's heavy burden I do sink. So again, light and heavy, antithesis again, play on words, soar and soar. This is them trying to sound intelligent and witty, and they're trying to battle each other in a game of wits. Who can be the more creative? This is not that far off from chirping. It's just a bit more intellectual. Moving through a few other lines here, which you should definitely take the time to read, but I'm just going to go ahead to Romeo. Eventually, as they try to convince him to continue on with them onto the party, Romeo basically says, look, guys, I don't want to go. And he says, and we mean well in going to this mask party, but 'tis no wit to go. And wit in this case means it's not wise. It's not wise to go. And then listen to this back and forth here, which is relatively famous. Why, may one ask? I dreamed a dream tonight, and so did I. Well, what was yours? That dreamers often lie. Good response by Mercutio in the Battle of the Wits. But watch what Romeo does. That dreamers often lie in bed asleep while they do dream things true. Fires back, right? The Battle of the Wits has gotten to be so strong at this point that Mercutio just unloads with what is known as the Queen Mab speech. And it just goes on and on and on. I'm going to have a link to this so that you can hear him. But he just keeps going on and making fun of Romeo nonstop. Eventually, Romeo says, "Peace, peace, Mercutio, peace," meaning please stop. This is nonsense. And again, Mercutio, in just dominating the battle of the wits, has this wonderful piece right here. And in this, we have metaphor, simile, personification, and alliteration. "True, I talk of dreams, which are the children of an idle brain, begot of nothing but vain fantasy, which is as thin of substance as the air, and more inconstant than the wind, who woes even now the frozen bosom of the north, and, being angered, puffs away from thence, turning his face to the dew-dropping south." You could also make the case that alliteration happens here, "wind who woes," and then there's a lot of O sounds here, so maybe there'd be assonance. The O sounds here are pretty numerous. Of course, Benvolio gets annoyed here when he says, "Can we please go to the party?" And then Romeo, his final response, involves some foreshadowing and some personification. Here, his last chance to explain the dream he had, he says, "I fear too early, for my mind misgives some consequence yet hanging in the stars shall bitterly begin his fearful date with this night's revels, and expire the term of a despised life closed in my breast by some vile forfeit of untimely death. But he that hath the steerage of my course, direct my sail on, lusty gentlemen." He, capital E, so that's God. And so we see untimely death mentioned again, heavy foreshadowing, and of course consequence is given personal qualities here. That there's this consequence hanging in the stars, beginning a fearful date. And then Benvolio says, "Strike drum," and they are off to the party.